Hi, everyone. Welcome back today to our Tiny Training question and answer series with a lawyer. Today's Thursday, November 16th, and we are excited to have with us a lawyer who's going to help answer all of our Tiny Training questions for our small business projects. And our lawyer today is with Crowley Fleck Attorneys. Before we get started and we talk about all of that good stuff, I'd just like to share a little bit with you about what Montana Child Care Business Connect does. We're a small business support with big community impact. Montana Child Care Business Connect is focused on supporting communities, on supporting communities and entrepreneurs with business elements of starting, owning, and operating our child care programs in the state of Montana. We were founded in 2022. We're Montana's statewide hub for child care business development and innovation. We work to provide services in the following 5 areas: trainings for ECP credits and continued business education, technical assistance through individual business consultations, community capacity building programs, and peer-to-peer business mentoring, and a robust web resource hub. Meet our team here. We've got Rhonda Schwenke, who is our program director, Alex Dubois, who is the business and community engagement manager, Jason Nitschke, who is our senior child care business advisor. My name is Kendra Edlin. I'm also a business advisor and training TA. Heida Borgnovo, who's our communications and outreach coordinator. Shelby Whalen, who's the community navigator. And Richard Heisteman, who's our program assistant and keeps us all together and in line. And with that being said, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Please meet Madeline Clark. She's a law associate at Crowley Fleck Attorneys in Missoula, Montana. She participates in commercial transactions, tax and trusts, and estate planning. Madeline received a Bachelor of Science in Sociology from Creighton University in 2015 and her Juris Doctorate from Gonzaga University School of Law in 2021. Go Zags! Madeline enjoys helping clients with a wide range of business matters, real estate, water rights, and planning for their futures. So before we bring Madeline in, I just want to remind everyone in the Tiny Training session that this is your Q&A time. This is your time to have an expert on hand to ask all questions that you might have. So we encourage you to please type in the chat your questions, raise your hand, and we can take you off mute and also ask questions. But with that being said, I'd like to welcome Madeline.
Thanks, Kendra, and thank you all for having me today. I'm excited to be joining you. As Kendra said, I'm Madeline. I'm an associate attorney with Crowley Fleck in our Missoula office. Crowley does have 11 offices throughout Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming, so we're pretty well equipped to handle lots of things. And my practice primarily involves commercial transactions, so a lot of business formation and just all the various issues that pop up with businesses, as well as real estate and water rights. I graduated from Gonzaga in 2021, so I'm fairly new to the practice of law, but I'm just excited to share as much as I can with you all today. And then I did just want to provide a standard disclaimer that this is not intended to be legal advice per se, just kind of like a general overview. And then if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer today, I'm happy to connect with you outside of this space and provide a more thorough answer, since I am a little limited in my knowledge. But again, I've had several different business formations and things like that have popped up. So yeah, I'm ready to start off with some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madeline. We're happy you're here with us. And again, I encourage you guys, if you have questions, to type them into the chat, but I'll start us off with a question today. I can get there. My first question for you, Madeline, is what is a business entity? And what should a childcare provider consider when choosing their entity structure?
Yeah, so this question is geared more towards kind of the beginning phase of thinking through starting a childcare business. But that also doesn't mean that if you're already operating a business, you can change structures. That's obviously like a pretty big process, or it can be, I guess. But so I'm just going to give an overview of different types of entities that you may choose from, and then the considerations that you should kind of be thinking about for those. So first off, you kind of have your LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company. It's probably the most common business structure. It's, a really cool, what we call just like business vehicle, because it just gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to structure these. They're very easy to start, which is also very cool. You just go onto the Montana Secretary of State website, and within this presentation, we could all sign up an LLC if we wanted to, which is really cool. But with that, there are a lot of considerations. And so first, as the name suggests, an LLC gives you personal protection from claims against the company. So just a surface level example, if someone were on your business property and they had a slip and fall and they injured themselves, that person couldn't bring a personal injury lawsuit against you. They could bring it against the LLC and the company, but that's where the liability cuts off. So you as an individual, your assets and your personal residence and your vehicles and everything are protected from those claims, which is obviously a really good thing in the business world. You're keeping that business and personal separate. However, as with most things in the legal realm, there are exceptions to this. But aside from, some kind of willful misconduct on your behalf, if you, purposely made the person fall, it's a pretty high burden for somebody to pierce the corporate veil, as we call it, and hold you personally liable. So the LLCs are good for that. And like I said, they're flexible. So there's no limit regarding members, like how many members you can have in an LLC, and it could just be one. So if you just wanted to be the one member in your LLC, that's perfect. And then you also get pass-through taxation. So the company itself is not taxed. The members are taxed for any distributions that are received. So that's kind of a nice tax consideration. Another option is what we call an S Corp. These are usually for larger businesses. They also provide limited liability, and you can't have more than 100 shareholders. And then you also get the benefit of the pass-through taxation with S Corp. There are more corporate formalities required in an S Corp. So you're issuing stock and you're holding shareholder meetings and things like that. And then the last one that we'll kind of go into a little more detail is the partnerships. That's just, at least two people deciding to go into business together. And there's no requirement on filing anything. It's actually just the legal presumption that any two people acting in business together are a partnership. So again, there's not much in terms of forming a partnership. You can just decide we're gonna proceed as a partnership. But there aren't that many tax benefits, and there's no there's no liability protection. So you could be held personally liable for something that happens within your business or something that your partner does. So we'll go into a little more detail later, but that's just something to consider. A couple of just other options I'll just throw out are like a sole proprietorship. If it's just one person and only one person, then you could do a sole proprietorship or a nonprofit corporation. Nonprofits are very cool, but there are a lot of steps to maintain them. And so I didn't want to go into too much detail on the nonprofits today.
Cool.
So different things you should consider are just like things to think about, questions to ask yourself. First, you want to kind of just determine how many people are going to be involved in your business. So like I said, with an LLC, you could just have one member. You can have more than one. And the difference kind of between an LLC and a sole proprietorship is if you think maybe today I'm starting my business just by myself, but I'll bring in people later on, the LLC kind of gives you that flexibility. And so that's kind of the difference between those two. If you're just having one person start it. And then you also want to think about who controls the business, who's making the day-to-day decisions. So an LLC can be member managed or manager managed. And that's just something to consider if you have people who are maybe investing money and who want to be members but don't want to have any management, then you'll want to have a manager. But if you or a couple of people are going to be funding it and involved, then you probably would be member managed. But those are kind of smaller decisions, but just things that you should think about. S corps have officers and directors, so usually you'd have to have quite a number of people involved in the decision making. And so usually an S corp would be something that's like a larger facility or something like that.
Great.
And then you also have liability and tax exposure to consider. And the final consideration is just like how you want to split profits and losses. A lot of times we're in our business, especially starting out, we're dreaming about all the money we're going to make. Of course, that's really exciting, but you also want to consider, sometimes these things take a few years to get up and running, and there can be losses in the beginning, and those have to be shared as well. And so you want to kind of think through how those are split. In an LLC, you do get to determine that. You can decide somebody's going to take on 85% of the burden, or, you can kind of dream up any percentage. And with an S corp, it's pretty straightforward. It's whatever your ownership percentage is how much you're going to be sharing in those. And then this is a longer answer for this first question, but some other considerations in the startup process, you'll want to be making sure you get an EIN tax identification number to open a bank account. You might want to get like a business loan or a line of credit for some of these upfront costs. Proper licensing for childcare providers, and grants or other funding that you might qualify for.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So like every other tiny training that we do, we want you guys to raise your hand or put your questions in the comment box. We will absolutely reach out and stop the presentation to ask your specific questions, but I'm going to continue on until we get some of those. What services should a childcare provider consider when starting and maintaining their childcare business?
Yeah, so I think that having a good relationship with like an accountant or a bookkeeper is probably pretty key. You can certainly do a lot of that, like managing your books and things like that on your own, depending on the size of your business. And there are so many user-friendly services like QuickBooks and things like that, which is awesome. But establishing a relationship with an accountant who can give you advice on taxes and things like that, especially if you're looking to hire employees, you want to make sure that you're following all the proper laws and regulations on that. I think it's just really important to have that relationship. Another person you might want to have is an insurance agent. You'll need kind of like your general policies for commercial businesses. And then you might need additional policies if you're operating within your own home, or you're transporting kids, or you're hiring employees. All of those things come into play with insurance. And then lastly, a benefits coordinator. So if you're planning on, or if you do operate your business and you treat yourself as an employee, or you're hiring other people, you might want to offer benefits. I don't imagine probably any of these businesses have like over 50 employees. So you probably don't have like the federal requirements that come up with benefits, but you might want to, you still want to make sure you're following applicable state and federal laws around employment. And then, I know that the childcare industry has a lot of turnover, so it might be something you're considering as a way to market your business to have the highest quality staff.
Perfect. It's almost like you've been on all of our trainings before. So this series has been about picking our trusted partners, and you just hit on many of the trusted partners that we've been discussing. So that's awesome. So we do in childcare from time to time consider opening up a childcare with a partner. And sometimes that partner is a spouse, sometimes that partner is a friend and neighbor. There are some legal considerations that we really want people to think about when they're choosing business partners. And so we thought we would ask you this question and let you answer it.
Yeah, this is a great question. Unfortunately, we get to see a lot of like the exciting startup parts of businesses, but typically people are hiring lawyers for when things go wrong. So we've seen a lot of these kind of blow up. I haven't seen it in the childcare industry specifically, but it's just kind of, you can imagine all different types of business relationships that sour for some reason, or, just things just move differently. So just as I'm just using business partner as a general term. It could be your, another member or, shareholder or anything like that. But, they're just, you just want to make sure that you are finding somebody that is going to probably be involved in the day-to-day operations. And so you really want to take the time to think about whether the person you're going into business with is the right fit. So we see issues arise when, like I said, there are losses when you kind of expected that there's going to be income and things like that. And so you just want to make sure that you have a lot of those conversations up front and that you have the proper formation documents that will spell all of these things out. So an LLC will have an operating agreement, like an S Corp will have bylaws, or any other kind of corporation will have bylaws. A partnership can and should have a partnership agreement. Especially and even if it's between spouses or family members, you're like, well, I don't need that. That's my mom or whomever, but you really should have these in place, especially down the line. Maybe you are really successful and you're adding in other people that are part of the business and you're growing and expanding. You just want to have these in place at the beginning. And then you also want to make sure you follow them. Just because you have it, you have to make sure that, you are going through whatever formalities the bylaws or operating agreement spell out. And so some things to consider in these documents are how initial capital contributions are treated. So maybe Kendra and I going together for a business, and I'm putting up 30% of the initial funding and Kendra's putting up 70%. How is that treated? Is that going to be 30% ownership for me and 70% for her, or is it going to be treated some other way? In certain entities allow you to have specific, you can flex that if you want. And then also maybe Kendra's putting in all the funding at first. And so is she then going to get repaid first, like with profits? Does she get that money paid back, or are we starting off on even footing, So, and that's where an accountant can also help you kind of track those, what we call capital accounts. And then, so that's kind of on the money side, but you also want to consider how membership, interest, or shares and ownership are transferred. So if a member dies or gets divorced or just wants to walk away from the business, what happens to their membership and ownership? Like, does the other member get the right to purchase it first? Can you sell it to whomever? You want to make sure that you're considering that, because if you don't have that in place, maybe they want to sell their membership interest to their sister and you don't get along with that person, or, you just kind of want to think through these and kind of have some control over that down the line. And the big one is if they pass away. I mean, does it go through probate? That's a big deal. So as a personal note to all of you, if you have estate plans, you might want to consider also in your own personal estate planning, naming what happens to your membership interest in any business that you have. It's just a good thing, a hard thing to think about, but something that's important to consider. And so just think about these documents, and you can definitely get free ones online and you can go the cheap route, but you might want to consider having somebody take a look at them and putting in
Yeah.
some upfront cost.
I think too that having the conversation with a professional like you helps people think about all the things that you don't know what you don't know. And
Oh,
I love that, there's a lot to consider when you're thinking of a partnership. We
yeah.
do have a question from someone.
Okay.
It says, is there anything we need to be aware of when we change our business status from an S corp to a single owner? Would you recommend that they close the business up completely and start up a brand new business, or would it be easier to take over with the one owner?
So with I guess with the one owner, it depends if you're gonna have an LLC or if you have another business entity, because there are rules about what who can own an S corp and things like that. So if you have an S corp going to an LLC, it's probably better to just go ahead and start the LLC. And an attorney or an accountant can kind of help you with the tax considerations for that off the top of my head. I haven't ever done one of those, so I'm not sure what the full process is, but it's usually a lot easier to go from an LLC to a different entity than from a different entity to the LLC, since the LLC has limited liability, but since the S corp does as well, it might not be as big of a consideration.
Okay. And then to follow that up, there's the question, how complicated is it after 25 years of business to become an LLC?
Well, it depends on like what you're starting as. If you're starting as a partnership, then yeah, just I guess it's hard to answer that question without knowing where
Without knowing.
where you're kind of going from. But again, like I said, the LLCs,
So she was a sole partnership before, sole
okay,
proprietor.
sole proprietorship, yeah, then you should be able to transition to an LLC pretty easily. And again, that's probably a conversation with your accountant or whomever does your books, because it will be a different tax consideration. But yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then also you guys will put Madeline's information up at the end again for you, so you'll be able to ask more questions. What would you suggest a new business owner? Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
Then our next question. What should a child care provider consider when hiring employees? Are there other employment considerations to think about?
Yeah, so I'll try to make this one pretty quick. But you just want to make sure that you're considering both your state and federal laws for not only just general employment, but also like specific childcare licensing requirements, and just know what those requirements are to keep and maintain your licensing. Another thing I would suggest is to do background checks. Like, sometimes again, those are upfront costs. Do the background checks, call references, do a social media check. I mean, it's just as important to know who you're hiring as it is to know who you're going into business with. And so you just want to be able to say that you're hiring like the best people. And I know that at least in the childcare industry, I don't have kids myself, but a lot of my colleagues do, and they're, utilizing childcare providers, and it's a big deal to be able to trust like who their kids are with during the day.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple other quick ones. Have an employee handbook, and make sure that your employees sign it. I think that's really important to make sure that all your policies are spelled out up front. And that way, if something does go awry and maybe you do want to terminate them employment, you have something to point to. I mean, there are a lot of rules and regulations that go into those. So it's not just enough to have a handbook, but at least you have something to point to that says, hey, you knew that these were our expectations and things like that. Then lastly, just make sure that, like I said, your employees have proper certifications like CPR and things like that. Sometimes additional certifications are helpful for marketing and things like that with your business.
Perfect. And these guys are all licensed, so those are all things that they have to do to become licensed, which is good.
Perfect.
Can you suggest a way that our providers can think about how to avoid risk specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, attorneys, we're trained to be very risk averse, so we see everything as a risk. There's just risk everywhere in our worlds. Hopefully that's not overwhelming for you. But it's just always good to kind of keep in mind. And so again, you want to connect and consult with the right professionals, be diligent about who you go into business with and who you hire. I'd say communication with parents and having policies in place for behavioral issues, health concerns, things like that. Think through what services you're going to provide and what the requirements are for your for the kids that are attending, in terms of like potty training, vaccines, behavior. Have these thought through and communicated to parents so that you again, you have something to kind of point to if you ever kind of get into that issue. And then another one is just when you're maybe thinking about expanding your business or mingling different businesses, just be careful about what the purpose of your business is, and thinking about, if say you are looking at purchasing a commercial building, you're going to lease out other spaces to other businesses and you'll have your business, you would probably want a different entity, like a separate entity owning the building, and then your childcare entity being separate. So just kind of think through some of that risk involved, because if something happens at your childcare establishment, suddenly you have a lawsuit and your whole building might be involved in that if everything's under the same LLC umbrella. So having separate entities for each business is sometimes the best practice.
That's really good food for thought. And I think that a lot of our expanding childcares probably wouldn't think about that one. So that's excellent.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I just want to ask really quickly, why would you say that it's important for a small business owner to hire an attorney and to have a lawyer on their bail team, to be one of those trusted partners?
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like a shameless plug, but I really don't mean it to be. I think I get it. Attorneys are expensive, and hopefully you don't really need one. But it's good to have on the front end to kind of help you walk through some of these, issues, and making sure you have those entity formation documents in place and they're like really strong. And then again, hopefully it's just a relationship you have somebody to go to if you need help, but it's not somebody that you're having to pay a lot of money to all the time. And then there are just like so many different issues that can pop up, so you have, maybe employment issues, maybe you have, we've had businesses come to us because they had somebody write a bad Google review, and like that's like really detrimental to their business and they need help with fighting that. So it's like really random things that can happen too, not just, injuries on site, but maybe you just want somebody to review a rental agreement because you're going to lease space, like things like that. We can kind of be mindful of and help you kind of think through that, employment issues, all kinds of things. So sometimes
all very good.
It's
all
nice.
Very good reason.
Exactly. So nice to have up front.
And while we're wrapping up today, I really do encourage you, if you have more questions. She just brought up the big, someone posted something that might hurt my reputation. Definitely, you guys, if you have questions, stick them in the chat. And Madeline, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of our Tiny Training series today. And thank you so much. Madeline is available, and all of the people at Crowley Flick, who are wonderful to work with and great for us. A shameless plug here for us. Remember that our resource hub is open. We'd love for you to sign up for our newsletter. Definitely follow us on all the socials. We have tons of information that keep you in the loop on all things childcare. And like always, with all of our trainings, we do ask you to please follow the QR code, give us a review, let us know how the trainings are going and what you think, so that we can keep providing wonderful trainings for you. Madeline, thank you so much for all your help today. We're happy that you could join us.
Thank you.
Any last minute questions? All thank yous. Perfect. Well, we will see you all next time for our series with a HR professional. Take care.